My ex-wife set me up with a deaf woman as a joke. She invited half the town, poured the wine, and waited for me to embarrass myself. I could see it in her smile, that quiet, rehearsed cruelty dressed up as generosity. The room was watching, waiting. But here is the thing nobody in that room understood about me. I had already lost everything worth protecting. My pride, my marriage, my idea of what love was supposed to look like. So when I sat down across from that woman, I wasn't afraid anymore. And that changed everything. Her name was Clara. I learned that from the small, cream-colored card she slid across the table the moment I sat down. Before I could fumble through an awkward introduction, before the nervous silence could swallow us both, whole high, I'm Clara. I read lips, so don't be shy. Just look at me when you speak. The handwriting was clean and unhurried, confident, the way only someone deeply comfortable with themselves can be. I looked up from the card and found her already watching me, dark eyes, calm, faintly amused, like she had already calculated exactly how this evening was going to go and had quietly made peace with it. I glanced around the table. My ex-wife, Dana, was seated at the far end, swirling her wine glass with that particular brand of theatrical casualness she always performed when she wanted to appear unbothered. Her friends were half watching us, half pretending not to. Someone whispered something. A muffled laugh followed. I felt the heat of it. That familiar, low burn of being made into someone else's entertainment. But then, I looked back at Clara, and I pulled out the small notebook I always kept in my jacket pocket. An old habit from years of working early morning shifts at the lumber yard, jotting down measurements and supply lists, and I uncapped my pen. I wrote, "I'm Daniel. I should warn you, I'm terrible at dinner parties, always have been." I slid it across to her. She read it. One corner of her mouth lifted. She took the pen from my hand, her fingers briefly grazing mine in a way that felt accidental, and also, somehow, not, and wrote back, "That makes two of us." I once knocked an entire breadbasket onto a man's lap within the first 4 minutes of a first date. I laughed, a real one. The kind that comes out before you can think about whether it's appropriate. Her eyes lit up watching me laugh, not in a showy way. Quietly, like she was storing it somewhere, I wrote, "Did he survive?" She wrote, emotionally. Unclear. And just like that, something shifted in the room. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in films, where the music swells and the lighting softens. It was quieter than that. More like the moment a fire catches, that small, decisive second when the flame stops flickering and becomes something steady. The table around us kept moving. Forks clinked against plates. Dana refilled her wine. But Clara and I had slipped into our own small world. Built entirely from ink and paper and the occasional shared glance. She told me she was a librarian. She had moved to Millhaven, our small, rain-soaked town, 8 months ago, after leaving a city she described, in 4 carefully chosen words, as loud in the wrong ways. I understood that completely. I told her I had lived here my whole life, that I knew every creak and every floorboard of this town. She looked at me with something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite admiration, something honest and in between. She wrote, "Does it ever feel like a cage?" I held the pen for a long moment before answering. Sometimes. But tonight it feels a little different. I watched her read that, watched the faint color that rose along the edge of her jaw. She didn't write back immediately. Instead, she looked at me, really looked, the way people rarely do anymore, and gave the smallest, most deliberate nod I have ever received in my life. Outside, the rain had begun again. I could hear it against the window panes, soft and persistent, the way it always falls in Millhaven in November, like it has nowhere else to be. And for the first time in a long time, neither did I. Dinner stretched on the way small-town evenings always do. Slowly, warmly, with too much food and not enough honest conversation. At least, that was true for everyone else at the table. For Clara and me, the conversation never stopped. It just lived on paper. By the time the main course arrived, we had filled 6 pages of my notebook. I had never used so many words in a single evening in my entire life. I am not, by nature, a talkative man. The guys at the lumberyard would tell you the same thing. Daniel Mercer speaks when he has something worth saying. Otherwise, he just shows up, does the work, and goes home. But something about writing to Clara made the words come easier. Maybe because there was no performance to it. No vocal tone to manage, no nervous laugh to cover an awkward pause. Just honest words on a page, passed between two people sitting close enough that I could smell the faint cedar scent of her perfume over the garlic and rosemary, of whatever Dana had decided to cook that evening. I noticed things about Clara that I don't think anyone else at that table noticed. The way she tracked the room constantly. Not anxiously, but with a quiet, practiced alertness. Reading the air. Catching the shape of conversations she couldn't hear, through the micro-expressions of the people having them. She had built an entire language out of observation, and she moved through it effortlessly. When Dana's friend Marcy leaned over and said something to the woman beside her, something that made them both glance our way with poorly disguised amusement. Clara caught it before I did. I saw the slight tightening around her eyes. The way her pen paused over the notebook for just a half-second longer than usual. She knew. She always knew. She just chose, with enormous grace, not to let it land. I wrote to her, "You don't have to stay if this is uncomfortable." She looked at me steadily, then wrote back, "I've been the most interesting person in uncomfortable rooms my entire life." I stopped leaving a long time ago. I read that twice. Then I wrote, "I think I've been leaving rooms my whole life without realizing it." She tilted her head slightly, studying me the way she seemed to study everything, thoroughly, without rush. "What made you stay tonight?" she wrote. And I looked at her, at the calm certainty in her face, at the way she held herself, like someone who had been through fire and come out the other side not hardened, but clarified. And I wrote the most honest thing I had said to anyone in years. "You didn't look at me like I was someone who needed fixing. Everyone here looks at me like that." She read it slowly, set the pen down, then picked it up again. "You don't need fixing, Daniel. You just need someone who isn't trying to." The rain outside grew heavier. I could hear it drumming steadily against the roof, filling the silence between moments. Across the table, Dana was watching us now with an expression I had not seen on her face in all the years I had known her. She wasn't amused anymore. She looked almost unsettled, like a woman who had planned a storm and was now standing in it herself, wondering how she had miscalculated the direction of the wind. Good, I thought, and I felt no guilt for thinking it. Because what was growing in that notebook, in those 6, 7, 8 pages of traded words and quiet laughter, was something Dana had never managed to give me in 4 years of marriage. The feeling of being fully seen by another person, not the version of me that was useful, not the version that was manageable or convenient. Just me, plainly and completely. Clara tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, glanced down at the notebook, then back up at me with that small, devastating, almost smile. She wrote one last thing before dessert arrived. "Same time tomorrow?" I didn't hesitate for even a single second. The dinner ended the way most things in Millhaven do. Quietly, without ceremony. People pulling on coats and exchanging the kind of goodbyes that mean nothing and everything at once. I helped Clara with her jacket. It was instinct. The kind of small, automatic gesture you make without thinking and only realize the weight of afterward. She stilled for just a moment when my hand settled the collar around her shoulders. A barely perceptible pause, like a breath held and then released. And then she turned and looked at me over her shoulder with an expression I didn't have a word for yet. I offered to walk her home. She considered me for a moment, pen already in hand out of habit, then seemed to decide something. She nodded once. We stepped out into the November rain together. Millhaven at night in the rain is a particular kind of beautiful that I had stopped noticing years ago. The way the street lamps throw gold circles onto the wet pavement. The way the old oaks along Carver Street hold the rain in their branches just long enough to release it in slow, heavy drops when the wind moves through. The whole town smells like pine and cold earth and something ancient underneath it all. I had walked these streets 10,000 times. That night, they felt entirely new. We walked without rushing. I held my jacket half extended over both of us, an impractical gesture that made her laugh, her shoulders shaking silently in a way I was already learning to recognize, and already, privately, loved. Halfway down Carver Street, beneath the one flickering lamp that the town had been promising to fix for 3 years, she stopped walking. She turned to face me. The rain was light now. A fine mist, more feeling than sound. A strand of damp hair crossed her cheek and she didn't move it. She held out her hand for the notebook. I gave it to her. She wrote slowly this time. More carefully than she had all evening, like the words required more handling. People usually treat me like a project. Something to be patient with. Something to be proud of themselves for tolerating. You didn't do that tonight. Not once. I took the pen. My hand was steadier than I expected. You're the least tolerable person I've met in years. I mean that as the highest possible compliment. She read it, that laugh again, silent, full-bodied, completely unguarded. When it settled, her eyes found mine and held them, and the air between us changed in that way it does, when something unspoken becomes impossible to ignore. I wrote, "Can I ask you something honestly?" She nodded. When Dana introduced us tonight, did you know it was meant to be a joke? She didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the wet pavement, then back up with a steadiness that made something ache quietly in my chest. She wrote, "Yes, I knew within 30 seconds. Then why did you stay?" I wrote. She looked at me for a long moment. The flickering lamp above us buzzed softly. The rain pressed gently against everything. She wrote 4 words, "Because you stayed first." I stood there in the rain and felt those 4 words rearrange something inside me that I hadn't known was still capable of being rearranged. I wanted to say something equal to the moment, but every word I reached for felt too small, so I did the only thing that felt true. I reached out and tucked that strand of damp hair away from her cheek. She didn't pull back. She just looked at me, steady, open, completely present, and the space between us became something I was one breath away from closing, and then my phone rang. The name on the screen stopped me cold. It was Dana. If this story is pulling at something in your chest right now, you are not alone. Hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Would you have answered that call? Because what happened next changed absolutely everything. I stared at Dana's name on that screen for 3 full seconds. Clara saw my face change. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. She simply took a small, quiet step back, not away from me, but enough to give me the space that the moment was demanding. That single gesture told me more about who she was than everything else combined. I declined the call. I slid the phone back into my pocket and looked at Clara. She raised an eyebrow, a small, dry, perfectly timed expression that managed to say, "Are you sure and good for you" simultaneously. I wrote in the notebook, "It can wait." She studied me for a beat, then nodded slowly. Something in her posture eased. We stood there a moment longer beneath that flickering lamp, but the spell had shifted. Not broken, just changed. The way a song changes key without stopping. We walked the rest of the way to her door in a comfortable quiet, and when she stepped onto her porch and turned back to face me, she took the notebook one last time. "Tomorrow. Coffee. The place on Mill Road with the terrible chairs," I smiled. "I know the one. 7 o'clock, she wrote. Then after a pause, she added, "Don't be late, Daniel." The way she wrote my name, deliberately, like it meant something, stayed with me the entire walk home. Dana called again at midnight, and again at 12:17. I answered the 3rd time, not because I wanted to, but because I knew Dana well enough to know that she would not stop until she had said whatever she had rehearsed in her head. I saw you walk her home." Her voice was light, conversational. The tone she used when she was working hard to sound like she didn't care. "That was sweet, Daniel. Very charitable of you." I said nothing. "I'm just calling to check in," she continued. "Make sure you're not reading too much into tonight. It was just dinner. I thought it would be good for you to get out, meet someone new. Even if," a pause, carefully placed, "even if the situation is a little unconventional. Say what you actually mean, Dana." Silence on her end. "Then she's not exactly. I mean, a relationship like that would be complicated. For you. I'm just thinking about what's best for you." The audacity of it sat in my chest like a stone. "You set that dinner up to humiliate me," I said. My voice was quieter than I intended. Sometimes quiet carries more weight than volume. You sat at the end of that table and waited for me to fail. And when I didn't, you watched a real conversation happen between two people, and now you're calling me at midnight to dismantle it. Another silence. Longer this time. "You don't know anything about her," Dana said. The lightness was gone from her voice now. "I know more about her after 3 hours than I learned about you in 4 years of marriage." I hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and listened to the rain against my window, and felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could properly remember. Certain. The next 2 weeks moved the way good things do when you're not yet brave enough to call them good. Carefully, gratefully, with both hands. Coffee on Mill Road became a ritual. Clara always arrived exactly on time. She ordered the same thing every morning: black coffee, no sugar, and a look of profound betrayal whenever the pastry case was empty. She made me laugh every single day, and every single day. Something inside me that had been quietly closed for years opened a little further, until the morning I walked into the library where she worked and found something on her desk that I was never meant to see. If you're feeling what I'm feeling right now, don't go anywhere. Subscribe so you never miss how these stories end. Because what I found on that desk broke something open that could never be closed again. It was a laptop, open, unattended. Angled just enough that anyone walking through the library's back office door, the one Clara had given me a key to 3 weeks earlier so I could drop off her forgotten umbrella, and had never asked for back, could see the screen clearly. I wish I hadn't seen it. I wish I had set down her coffee, left the umbrella, and walked back out into the rain without looking. But I looked. It was a video 47 seconds long. Recorded on a phone, slightly shaky, taken from across a dinner table. The angle was Dana's end of the table. You could see Clara and me clearly, heads bent together, passing the notebook back and forth, laughing in that quiet, contained way we had that evening. From a distance, without context, without sound, it looked. I searched for the right word and landed on the cruelest one. It looked ridiculous. A man scribbling furiously in a notebook. A woman reading it, both of them oblivious to the room around them. Dana had filmed it. The title she had typed above the upload draft read, "My ex-husband's connection." With his death date. It had not been posted yet. It was still in draft. But the comments she had already written in the caption box told me everything about her intentions. Words like desperate and pathetic, and a string of laughing emojis that made my stomach turn over slowly. And then I saw the second tab open beside it. A message thread. Dana's name at the top, and below it, a conversation with 3 other women from that dinner, Marcy included, that had been running for 2 weeks. Screenshots of Clara's library profile page, her full name, her workplace address, comments about her deafness that I will not repeat because they do not deserve to be repeated. And at the bottom of the thread, a plan. They were going to post the video that Friday to the town's community Facebook group, the one with 4,000 members. Every parent, every employer, every neighbor in Millhaven. I stood in that back office and read every word of it. My hands were very still. That is the thing I remember most. I expected them to shake, the way they do when emotion becomes too large for the body to hold quietly. But they didn't. They were completely, unnaturally still. I set Clara's coffee down on the desk beside the laptop. I walked back out through the library the way I had come in. Clara was at the front desk, helping an elderly man find something in the reference section. She had her back to me. She was using a combination of written notes and careful lip reading to assist him, and the patient precision of it. The way she gave that man her complete, unhurried attention made something in my chest fracture, along a line I hadn't known existed. She hadn't done anything to anyone. She had simply shown up to a dinner she likely knew was designed to belittle her, conducted herself with more dignity than everyone else in that room combined, and then, quietly, without asking for anything, walked into my life and made it better. And Dana was going to use that against her. I sat in my truck in the library parking lot for a long time. The rain came down steadily. The wipers weren't on. I let the water cover the windshield until the world outside was nothing but soft, distorted shapes and the sound of rain on metal. I had two choices. I could go to Dana, privately, ask her to delete it, absorb whatever she needed to say to me in exchange for Clara's privacy, protect Clara without her ever knowing she needed protecting, or I could stop managing damage quietly. I could stop being the man who leaves the room. I need you to stay with me right now. Because the decision I made next is the one that defined everything that came after. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because this is where the story truly begins. I called Dana from the parking lot. She answered on the second ring, which told me she had been expecting it. Someone had seen my truck outside the library and told her. In a town like Millhaven, someone always sees. Daniel, delete it, I said. The video, the caption, the entire message thread. Delete all of it today. A pause. Then that voice, measured, almost sympathetic. The one she used when she wanted to appear reasonable while being anything but. I don't know what you think you saw, but... Dana. I said her name the way you say something for the last time. I'm not calling to negotiate. I'm not calling to argue. I'm telling you, as clearly as I know how, that if that video goes anywhere, the Facebook group, a text message, anywhere, I will stand in the middle of this town and tell every single person exactly what you did and exactly why you did it. Silence. You're embarrassing yourself over a woman you've known for 2 weeks, she said finally. The reasonableness was gone now. Maybe, I said, but I'm done being embarrassed on your behalf. I hung up. Then I sat there for another moment, breathing slowly, and I made the second decision. The harder one. I went back inside. Clara was alone at the front desk now, entering something into the library's catalog system, her reading glasses low on her nose. She looked up when she heard the door, and her expression moved through surprise, then warmth, then something careful when she registered whatever was on my face. She reached for her notebook. I gently put my hand over hers before she could open it. She stilled. I looked at her directly, the way she had always asked me to, and I spoke slowly and clearly. I need to tell you something, and I need you to know that I am telling you because I respect you. Not because I want to protect you from it. You don't need that kind of protecting. I told her everything. The laptop, the video, the message thread, the plan for Friday. I told her without softening any of it, because she had spent her entire life with people softening things for her and calling it kindness. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. She looked down at the desk. One hand rested flat against the wood surface, pressed down, like she needed to feel something solid. I watched her breathe through it. In and out, slow and deliberate. Then she picked up her pen. How long have you known? An hour, I wrote. Why did you come back in? I looked at her, at this woman who had walked into a room designed to diminish her, and had somehow, without effort, become the most luminous person in it. Because you told me once that you stopped leaving uncomfortable rooms. I'm trying to learn that from you. She read it. Her jaw tightened in that way it did when she was holding something large very carefully inside herself. Then she wrote, slowly, "Romebody has ever come back in before, Daniel." And that was the thing that finally broke me open. Not with sadness. With something cleaner than that. Something that felt like relief and grief and gratitude arriving all at once. I reached across that desk and I took her hand properly this time. Not a brush, not an accident, and she let me, and she looked at me with those steady, dark eyes, and I understood completely that this was not the beginning of something fragile. This was the beginning of something that had already decided to last. Donna deleted the video that same evening. I don't know if it was my phone call or her own conscience. I chose to believe it was a small mercy she gave herself, and I let it go completely. Some things are not worth carrying. What happened after that unfolded the way quiet, real things do. Without announcement, without drama, without anyone's permission. I bought a book on American Sign Language the following Monday. A thick, worn paperback from Clara's own library shelf, which she slid across the desk to me, with a look that said she had been waiting for me to ask. I was terrible at it for weeks. My hands fumbled through letters, like a man trying to build something intricate with tools he didn't yet understand. Clara would watch me attempt a word, press her lips together with enormous dignity, and then her shoulders would shake with that silent, full-bodied laugh that I had decided, somewhere around the third week, was my favorite thing in the world. She taught me patiently, every evening. At the kitchen table of her small house on the edge of Carver Street, with rain on the roof and tea going cold between us and the notebook still there. Always there, but needed less and less with every passing week. 6 months later, on a Tuesday evening in May, when the rain had finally softened into something that almost felt like spring, I signed to her for the first time without looking at my hands. 3 words. She watched my hands complete them. Her eyes filled, not dramatically, not performatively, but in that quiet, unstoppable way of someone receiving something they had stopped believing was coming. She signed back. 3 words. The same 3. And I understood everyone. My ex-wife set me up with a deaf woman as a joke. She thought she was writing a story about my failure. But here is what she never understood about me, about either of us. We were never the punchline. We were always the point. And in a small, rain-soaked town that thought it knew everything about everyone, 2 people who had both been quietly underestimated found each other across a dinner table and built something that no one else's cruelty was ever going to be large enough to touch. If this story moved you the way living it moved me, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the people who try to diminish you sometimes lead you directly to the one who sees you completely. And if you are waiting for your own moment beneath a flickering lamp in the rain, stay. Don't leave the room. The right person always comes back in.